Well, welcome to the second session on Ancient Future Wisdom and the 9th session of the Connectathon March 2023. It's been really exciting so far. A lot of deep personal and also scientific and strategic insights into the challenges of today's and above all opportunities. And now we're moving into the second hour of Ancient Future Wisdom. Just to remind those that just joined us, we continue to explore the beliefs and practices of our ancestors to shape our civilization to come, to dare to imagine, to dare to dream and dream collectively. This time, this Connectathon, the topic is conflict resolution. So what we are after are some good stories, index common practices, and of course, the great contributions for the growing book, which we plan to publish by the end of the year as volume 1 on Ancient Future Wisdom. Just before we continue, a couple of house rules. Of course, first of all, we would like to welcome you all. If you want to speak, raise your hand and technical support will unmute you. If possible, please keep the visuals on. If for some reason you are disconnected, just use the same link and come right back. And that's pretty much it for our discussion. Allow me, just before we enter the next invitation, I'd like to introduce just our moderator today, Maria Rubio de Heart from Colombia. She is also ambassador of Ecocivilisation for Americas, but very successful businesswoman and very devoted to circular economy and everything that involves sustainable development. But we have two very special guests, and I will introduce them right after I share a thought with you that I found very interesting. When I was searching on First Nations art of conflict resolution, I found this book that I will certainly recommend to you to take a closer look, The Ancient Art of Conflict Resolution. And one particular segment really stuck with me. With respect, everything else comes. Does it sound familiar? We've heard it so many times today already. With respect, everything else falls in place. Respect for the earth, respect for each other, respect for yourself. If you have that, then everything else falls into place. And with this introduction from First Nation, I'd like to introduce our two distinguished speakers today, who will share the wisdoms of ancestors and especially focusing on conflict resolution. First, my dear friend, colleague, who I respect tremendously, Jacqueline Widmar Stewart, who is an author, speaker, filmmaker, and incredible researcher of Celtic history. I'm not gonna dive too deeply into that because you will hear from her, and I'm sure you will be equally impressed. And she is a really ongoing researcher, dives deeply, not into history books, but to the archaeological findings, because that's where the truth has its seeds. And the second speaker, which I just got to know through Connectathon, Jiyun Park, transdisciplinary curricula design and development, and we were able to hear her today already a few times, either as a speaker or somebody who's sharing very in-depth comments. So we're very much looking forward to hearing from her as well. She is a public speaker, life coach, and interior design in architecture, but we've seen that she's very deeply involved also into quantum physics, rules of quantum world. So I'm eager to hear her opinion as well, or her story, her contribution to our today's topic. So now I'm leaving you in the hands of Maria, and I invite us all to hear the wisdoms of Americas. Please, Maria.
Thank you, Violeta. So happy to be here with you. And we are very eager to hear about Jiyun and Jacqueline, all the ancient wisdom and how they have been studying and working around their own lines of work, and how we can together understand better how to build a better future with all their knowledge. So who wants to start? Maybe Jacqueline, would you like to start?
Sure, I'd love to start. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, heartfelt thanks to you, Violeta. I have such enormous respect for the way you make things happen, such beautiful things happen. And I'm delighted to meet you, Maria. Thank you so much for monitoring. And Jiyun, it's a pleasure to be here with you too. I'd like to start out just by saying how wonderful it is to be here on the day of the equinox, when the earth finds equilibrium between light and dark, between day and night. All over the world right now, we have that balance. And I hope that inspires all of us to work for achieving this balance in humanity as well as the earth. And one intriguing thought before I dive into what I love to talk about most, our Celtic history in Europe, is that just imagine 3,000 years ago, you're in Europe and you're 3,000 miles from home. You go to the nearest fest hall and celebrate with the locals there, because everybody is celebrating this day that everybody can see everywhere they are. And the more I delve into the Celtic past, the more I see the connectivity there, united by silence, by looking up into the sky and knowing that everybody else has that same sky that guides them. It's such a unifying, magical idea that the whole universe is available to that one spot on the face of the earth. So I would like tonight just talk a little bit about why I'm on this quest I'm on, and why it centers on Europe but applies really worldwide. I want to know why my grandparents fled Europe, all four of them. And I'm using law. I'm a lawyer. I use linguistics. I've studied languages. And more recently, we've been using the tools of archaeology and genetics, and mainly my own eyes on site, to understand what happened in our family, and more broadly, because I see it happening with almost everybody you talk to. Somebody has a story about being displaced, not wanting to leave your homeland, but having to. So once I realized how flawed the victor's version of history is, from trying to be a scholar and trying to study other people's work, I realized how the victor's version really predominates. So rather than trying to sift through what's real and what's not, because I certainly don't have the capacity or the expertise to do that, I have been searching back in time for the truth. And I came to realize that the role of women has been suppressed, and that the attempts have been made to erase women from European history in arts and science and literature. So I searched for this earlier time, and I have found it. I found that in Celtic Europe that spanned from today's British Isles all the way into Turkey, women were not suppressed. They were venerated and they were honored alongside men, and that they were leaders. And yes, they were warriors. So to document this quest, I've written 4 books in the Hidden Women series that focus on Celtic Europe. The 5th book in this series, Legacies from a Free Celtic Europe, will be published this spring. Thus far, I've written 8 books and published 24 short films free on YouTube. 3 of my books have been published in Europe. Finding Slovenia is in its 7th printing. I'd like to go to substance now, though, and I'm going to be very frank and direct with my comments. So I regret any offense that this might cause. While this is not an easy subject, it's of vital importance. My takeaway for you today is threefold, and it rests on the difference between Celts and Romans. An advanced Celtic culture honored both its men and women, and this prevailed all across Europe before the conquerors invaded. Roman invaders subjugated these people and imposed laws that made women the property of men. Later, the church state incorporated these abuses into law and doctrine. Here's the good news. The world can regain the ancient equilibrium between men and women by reinstating Celtic ideals. How can we undo the damage that's been done to women by conquests and invasions? Let's go from the beginning. And a subject dear to all of our hearts, mothers. Mothers are the gateways to the human continuum. Mothers grow and nourish their children with their own bodies, which means that women can sustain their children in the way men cannot. The mother has been crucial to family survival because of her unique ability to feed her children. Even early cave drawings reflect the ancient reverence that has been reserved for mothers. Experts often interpret drawings of women nursing children or women with multiple breasts as worship of a fertility goddess. I would urge a broader view, one that honors women as the pillars of the family, the foundation of humanity. Here's why. The mother protects her children. It's instinctive in tigers, it's instinctive in humans. Even a gentle mother deer will turn fierce if you come too close to her fawn. Isn't that why women are naturally warriors? Because they naturally protect their family? Because of their many vital roles, mothers used to be highly venerated. What went awry? Why have women been vilified and men glorified? The answer becomes apparent by looking at religion as a belief system, but also as a male authoritarian system. When the Roman Empire invaded and occupied Celtic lands, the Romans imposed their laws, and those laws subjugated women. Women became chattel, property to be owned and traded by men. Later, the church state taught that women are inferior to men and women must be subservient to men. These ideas still dominate today. We see from the Iron Age traces that this disparagement of women was not part of the pre-Christian world. Celts had a common culture across Europe before the Christian era, and it flourished with technology, communication, art, science, and trade. Women had an equal place with men. We need to recognize the role of religion in taking that Celtic equilibrium away from us. How do we do that? The effects of the Christian takeover need to be reversed. The Celtic past provides answers. First, religion imposes male authoritarianism and restricts freedom based on gender. What to do? restore freedom for all, regardless of gender. The difference between pre-Christian and Christian Europe can be seen vividly through the difference in their treatment of women. Religion denigrated women in Europe through the art, literature, rewriting history, suppressing knowledge, and controlling the narrative. Christian art shows women as subservient, heads bowed, eyes down. Celts portray their women with heads, eyes, and arms up, clad in golden gowns, wearing golden diadems. Equal rights for women must be written back into law. Second, religion asserted itself as family. What to do? Honor science above myth. Dividing the family is an effective divide and conquer strategy that has been used by attackers since Caesar. To strike at the very core of Celtic society, Christianity divides the family. Christian writings explicitly pit child against parent and turn members of the household into enemies. Even their words reflect this takeover. Biologically, a child can only have one father, yet most religions command worship of a pretend and unseen master called father. Sister, brother, father, mother. Twisting these words and relationships elevates religion above family and demeans women. How to undo this? Use science and law to distinguish fact from fiction. Your real father is your only father. Third, women became men's property. What to do? Give women back their equality with men. The Celtic veneration of women changed when the Romans brought slavery to Europe. Women had no rights to own property or to inherit property. We must reinstate women as full owners of themselves and their possessions. Fourth, rape and sexual abuse have been downplayed as part of war and endorsed by religion. What to do? Hold sexual attackers to account, whether under the flag of religion or not. Slaughter and rape of women is a key part of divide and conquer tactics. When men use women as unwilling vessels for their seed, women are denigrated to chattel, to men's property without rights of their own. Rape takes propagation away from the protection of the family structure. We need to punish rapists instead of their victims. Fifth, religion destroyed evidence of the women's role. What to do? Restore Celtic memorials to women. Technology now connects the advent of Christianity with the assault on even the likenesses of women. That suggests that removals and beheadings of female statuary has been part of the Christian conquest. These tributes should be reconstructed as part of Europe's cultural legacy. Sixth, public coffers subsidize religious authoritarianism and abuse of women. What to do? Remove tax exemptions for religions. When religions discriminate against women, they do not serve the general good. When religions discriminate against women, they should not be tax exempt. Otherwise, that amounts to the government subsidizing discrimination. Taxes collected from religious institutions that discriminate against women should be used for the public good. Seventh, religions knowingly spread disinformation about women. What to do? Hold religions accountable for damages incurred due to intentional disinformation they spread. Most religions are male-dominated, authoritarian, and purportedly serve a male master. If the master tells men to kill heretics, they do it. Untold thousands of women perished at the hands of men for 1,400 years under heresy laws. Crimes against women largely have gone unpunished. There's no reason that the standard legal doctrine of estoppel should not apply to religions. There's no reason to exempt religions for the direct consequences of their actions. Estoppel requires that individuals be liable for their deliberate misinformation if others suffer tangible harm as a result. Religion, too, should compensate those it harms. Eighth, religion overtook the Celtic fest halls that used to be community centers for celebration, open to all, regardless of religion. What to do? Restore free and open fest halls. The old Celtic heroes halls honored male and female heroes by placing their likenesses in halls to memorialize them with bright banners and statuary. Religion overtook these halls and claimed the heroes as their saints. These memorials need to be recognized as such, not as religious. Religion has changed places of joyous Celtic celebrations into morgues of death threats. In some ancient Celtic fest halls that have been overtaken as churches, it's still possible to detect the former use as fest halls. Colorful murals show women with their foot on a serpent's head. Some statuary of women dancing and singing remains in alcoves of remote fest halls. These symbols of hope contrast starkly with cult of death motifs. One striking example is what we take to be a Celtic veneration of a woman with a joyous face. She's standing under an arch, likely a sign of veneration itself. The fire at her feet and sword through her neck were no doubt added when the Celtic fest hall was turned into a Christian church. This blatant example of the attack against women is disturbing to see, especially for children. The repugnancy of seeing a woman displayed in this way emphasizes the urgency of reversing religion's attacks on women. We must convert churches back into upbeat places for festivities, free and open for all without the cult of death overlay. What has happened in Europe emblematizes what has happened all over the world. At this time of balance between light and dark, may we regain the equilibrium between men and women. Male-female parity can be done because it has been done. Let's restore women to their reasonable place in our world for everyone's sake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacqueline. How wise are your words? And it really resonates in my personal history in several ways, and I want to share. And we will open to questions after Jiyun exposes also. And the ways it resonates is, first of all, I grew up in Colombia, South America, which is a very man-oriented society also. But I come from a family of very strong, successful women, and we were investigating our history, and it turns out I'm the descendant of a Spanish Jew that was condemned by the Inquisition to be burned. And he decided to fly away to, well, actually got on a boat and came to Colombia. And that's where I come from. And now we've been able to progress in a way that our family really values women and their success. But it's not easy in this type of society. And I always say, I have a daughter and a son. And I always say that we are responsible as mothers of our children to not be on this constant battles for control between women and men. we are the ones that have to grow together with our children and our families with that vision that we are all equal. And if we do so, then the society will progress. It's really, really powerful what you're saying. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your words. And you know, I have relatives who one of the kids' sons has married a woman from Colombia.
Okay.
And the same story. She and her sister and mother all flew back to Portugal because Portugal expelled Jewish people. And now Portugal is opening citizenship to those who were wrongfully expelled. Right. You know, one point I just want us to make, this has been a relatively recent discovery for us, that places where women have been persecuted are also places where Jewish people have been persecuted. And the thing is, they're ancient settlements, ancient Celtic settlements, strategically located. But invaders come to you. You don't go to the invaders. So to have a place that's constantly under threat and constantly under fire indicates that this has been the way it's, you know, for the ancestors were facing this same thing. And we can learn so much from how we got here, how we survived. Because without them, none of us would be here.
Exactly.
So your words really resonate with me. Thank you so much for sharing them. And once you voice your own history like that, you find that everyone else either has a direct line to the history like that or knows someone who does. It's amazing. My classmates from Stanford Law, the more I talk with them, the more I learn from Ukraine, from Russia, from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, all of these different places that relatives have fled. And the stories that come are wonderful. I have one classmate whose father would not marry until he brought all 4 of his brothers from Ukraine. And now he has a family of his own and so on. But these stories of the family holding together are just wonderful. I don't want to monopolize, but I'm so excited to hear what you say. I'm delighted to be here. And again, thank you,
Jacqueline. We have to keep on talking after the meeting. Yeah.
Great.
Jiyun Park, please tell us about your story, all that you've been working around, and how it has to do with ancient wisdom. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I want to just take a breath to inhale the witnessing of Maria and Jacqueline as to the universal experience of women, mothers, families, because as witnesses, we are part of the deeply personal as universal. And I just wanted to take that breath and thank Violeta and Tim and Alexander, and especially Theriel, for inviting me. I live in North America, but I am from South Korea. And so I feel it's important in Iowa City to honor the Meskwaki Nation, the Omaha, the Puka, and the Ho-Chunk nations as indigenous to the land where I happen to live at this moment. But I wanted to also honor the Americas, both and, because I think we've separated out this North America, South America kind of Eastern, Asian, Western, and there is a ancient wisdom of the mother that's been otherized that I believe, or I've listened to you, and I listened for 12 years to community. As to the fierce survival and current thriving despite the rape, the pillaging, the observation, witnessing of our children's experiences, trauma experiences. And so I was talking with Artie, and she said, someone said the ancient past is so full of blood. And as a shaman, I've seen in numerous clients that they still have in their current incarnation the residual of the sword through the neck. And so energetically, I'm often guided to remove that sword from, or lance it, or, there's been so many violent atrocities to the body, male and female, that I'm perpetually removing those swords to the neck. And so the ancient wisdom I would like to invoke is the remembrance of the circle as what was also called by Ishtar as the ring to the rod. So it was held by the king, the Assyrian king. There was a rod, which is the ruler, the linear, and then the ring, which is the circle. And if you look at in ancient China, 𝐀𝐧𝐬 held, it was a serpentine snake dragon, one hand the ruler or line or pole or vertical, and then in the other hand the circle. And in a similar way, we look at ℍ𝕠𝕤𝐻, who is the caducus, and so it's the union of both and we have just omitted and oppressed since Constantinople. Constantine's mother was Christian, but then religion became an empire of, became made an empire, and power was associated with religion in the 4th century. At the same time, in the 4th century, we separated out natural phenomena into an Aristotelian, what became scientific empirical paradigm, and then St. Augustine cosmic Christian experience. And so I just want to almost return us, excuse me, I'm going to close the door, to a pre-4th century, pre-imperial, pre-separation from source or spirit or ancestors, or so that this is a pre-north, south, east, west, and that so that the resonance of the Celtic wisdom, insight, knowledge, experience is one I think exists universally. What I know of Celtic knots and Celtic patterns is actually coming through this scientific quantum mechanical term called entanglement and knotting mathematics. So I think the patterns that Celtic and other ancient cultures preserved was natural phenomena that quantum mechanics and quantum physicists are now uncovering. So it's the snake biting its tail, but it's not in the past. The snake is biting the tail towards the future. And I think there's something in terms of responding to the legal, there's a doctrine of discovery where Pope Alexander, I think it was the 6th, said that those under the empire of the papacy could go and take over the lands, indigenous lands that weren't already owned by Western imperial powers. And that included women, children, and we know that story, Christopher Columbus like story. But I'd like to invite us to this circle consciousness or awareness as the balancing shape, energy, and material awareness of our hearts, connecting to an embodied, empowering life force energy that we all possess. And I wanted to say one other thing about the doctrine of war that President Bush, it's the Bush doctrine, that says you can go and attack a place if you perceive a threat. And I wonder if there's a legal way of articulating a doctrine of I'm not sure what the word would be, a doctrine of mother or a doctrine of, just a doctrine of mother, because I have a son also. And so I feel he is as feminine as anyone I've met in a way. So it's not like that. But anyway, the more we invoke the circle, we balance out the grid consciousness or the linearity, and we recognize, I think someone shared earlier about the tree and the branching and the tree and the rooting, and there's so much wisdom in the Celtic nodding of the growth of the
We lost her.
I think we lost you, Jiyun. We lost your
Jiyun, you'll have to repeat yourself, and we'll have to see that we can hear you, because we can't hear you clearly right now.
Am I going over? What's going on? Something.
Could you try speaking again, please?
Hello.
Yes, I think that's clearer. Can everyone else hear Jiyun as well?
Sorry.
Yes. All right, we're back.
Sorry, I'm not sure where I skipped out. Anyway, I just want us to recognize that if we apply just a Celtic, it's like almost taking one system and replacing it with another. But if we also find the universal thread with Persian, Vedic, Buddhist, South Mayan, Yoruban, what we will recognize in the plurality is that there's a universal pattern of an emergent entanglement, and that complexity ultimately cycles through to a singularity or universal unifying quality, a universal thread, a unified field. And also, if we reverse engineer it and go back to the big breath, as Jude Curran, the physicist cosmologist, has said, if we start with the big breath and watch the entropy over 13.8 billion years, that complexity that has emerged and evolved is the entanglement of that patterning tree. And we find ourselves in a just a temporal epoch of, but this is not the, that each ancient past was not the end. We're on a continuum, a cycle, a spiral, and we've gone through this particular portal where we are cognizant of our own neural network being analogous to the universal multiverse of galaxies, and there's a correlation, and that pattern is fractal in nature, and that's a mathematical language which is universal. However, it's also a cultural patterning language. If you look at any of the women's work when they're crocheting or knitting, and any of the artwork, the Greek key is like this. You'll see repeatedly the nodding. You'll see it repeatedly in artifacts, archaeology, art, and so I want to just say, if we look again and revisit ancient makers' craft, you'll see quantum mechanics and fourth dimensional coral, you'll see in nature, and women knew it in their hands and their making. You don't need, like, I'm an architect, but I found the architecture without architects in villages to be sometimes even more than what I might have been trained to make. And so I think I just want to humbly recognize and recognitize, however minute this circle is, as a point. If you take it through space, it becomes a spline. And if you take that spline through space again, it becomes a hyperbolic parabola, like our breath, or the coral, or the fluttering of an aspen leaf in the wind. And if you take that still one more, if we take it one more through the toroidal capacity of an embryonic growth of form, in any of the 8 creatures, the embryo is at 6 or 8 weeks, looks nearly identical. So then our DNA spiral, like the ring, the circle, the rod, that spiraling of the necessary circle, that spiraling and the growth of forms both unites us, balances us, and invites us, because we are one point in the toroid, or the donut, which is also our energy, our chakra body, but it's also one 360 of us sit in one plane. There's 360 planes in a sphere. The infinite capacity of that breath, that is both you, your child, your not child, the child you even witness doesn't even have to come from your own womb. It could be the child that you teach, that teaches you, the child that teaches me. That point, connecting the dots through our breath, circling back to ourselves as already made whole. There's so many beautiful metaphors that are actually phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And we separated it out, and we named it, and we categorized it, and we branched it as either this or that. But what if it's both and the intra-being? So in chemistry, inter is not taking an oxygen molecule and a hydrogen molecule connecting. Intra is the ionic plasma that is already part of both elements. They're already there. It's already there.
Thank you, Jiyun. We only have 5 minutes for a discussion, and people are also commenting about your words, if that is intraconnectedness. I think you've been explaining the circle, because they were also asking, what do you mean by the circle exactly? But I would like to open for discussion. There's a question, is if a circle is an infinite spiral, for example.
Yes. Yes, so the smallest unit of measure is a Planck unit. It's 2 pi.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. The Monroe Doctrine of War is incredibly problematic, and I completely agree that we need a strong counter consciousness, says Ramit. I don't know if anyone, Jacqueline, maybe you want to comment also around the circle that 𝐂𝐬𝐿 comments. No.
Jackie, just unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, sorry. I see the circle often as a repeating motif in early civilizations, and I think it does indicate that continuum that of humanity, of the universe, and I see it also as a way of understanding the development that has taken place, like that. If you're smelting iron, for example, when you first start to smelt iron, and it's a design along with the spiral that is easy to make and very distinctive, and then gets picked up and carried in the illuminated manuscripts and the architectural motifs. It's something that is a connector from one person to the next. So I think the circle has enormous consequences, and it gives all of us hope too, doesn't it?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Jacqueline. Artie raised her hand. Artie, go ahead.
All right, so Jiyun, wow, that was really enriching. And I think you and I, we've had that conversation in the past as well, that circles and spirals symbolize continuity and our understanding of what it means to be in a continuum. I firmly believe that our life purpose, and I think a human being is the only character amongst all living species, which is caught in this poetic conflict of what is my purpose? Why am I here? I think one of my personal discoveries has been to serve as a link in the chain of that continuity. So that becomes two-pronged. One is that you perform as the link, and second is you serve to connect what's before you and ahead of you.
Correct.
So when we look at continuity, there could be many graphical representations. I could be thinking of my head having a conical structure over it that goes out into the expanse, and people walking along with me have similar cones, and we are intersecting somewhere in the cosmic zone, right? And that's where we're supposed to actually embody that entire cosmic wisdom, knowledge, and that's where the intersection needs to take place for us to embody that and perform that as the technology that we are as individual creatures of this beautiful, beautiful system of veins, blood, cells, bones, muscles, everything that's come about to create us. And that is the value we need to understand of why we breathe, why we've been given the privilege to breathe.
Thank you, Artie. Now Violeta has her hand raised.
Yes, thank you. This was two very different, but at the same time so similar speeches and introductions to the conflicts. And I was wondering, maybe Jackie, you, and then even Jiyun, our genetic memory has all this violence that has been happening in the past somehow recorded. And no matter how philosophical we get, these kind of traumas keep haunting us until we do something with them. And just recently, it's a very important story about the conflict between Magdalena and St. Peter, which could potentially be the source of all these historical atrocities and conflicts between men and women in the last 500, 600 years. Do you have any thoughts on that, and how can we overcome something so, in a way, simple, but on the other hand, with such enormous consequences? A man and a woman disagreeing, and maybe a man feeling a bit overlooked, and then caused all these incredible changes in the religion that brought so many atrocities to humanity. What's your thought on that?
I come back to the distinction between the Celts and the Romans, and between the residents and the attackers, invaders, conquerors. And I see in the displacements of people that have taken place that there were such atrocities committed by Julius Caesar early on, in a way I think that really took the Celts a long time to combat, because they were beyond anybody's imagination of what brutality could be. Killing children in front of the grandparents. You know, we hear this in war, these things are repeated again and again, and part of it, I'm convinced, and I don't know the answer, but it's hideous. It's you've had to do, or you've witnessed, in order to survive, something so atrocious that you can't tell your kids. If, you know, because you will put their life in danger, you'll put your own life in danger. If you're enslaved, you really cannot communicate truth to your children. It's a vicious way of containment, but it's very effective, because even now, atrocities that were committed in the last year, in the last war, people are still keeping those things to themselves, because how can you tell your children? You're protecting your children against the horrors. You want them to have a calm, unfrantic life. You don't want to make them crazy. How do you preserve ancient wisdoms without destroying your children?
May I just, so in 2012, I got called out as a shaman. I didn't know it was in my lineage. I didn't know what that meant. So for, I don't know, 10 years I've been practicing, and one of my clients was, she said, I was working on her and I was shaking like this, and she was shaking, and I wasn't really touching her. And she said, we just healed sexual bondage. And you can't grasp that. You just can't grasp it. But I saw shackles on her ankles. And then within a week, even on Fox News, the woman comes out and she says what happened to her. And I work in with victims of rape, trying to hold space as a trauma-informed listener, and then to try to empower those who have, like Heather, so beautifully, so bravely, so wisely come through. And the first and probably most important thing to say is, I see you, I hear you, I sense you, I feel you. And then permission that you are seen, mirrored, reflected in meeting people where they are. There's such a spectrum of humanity, 8 billion. And to be able to meet everyone where they are, this circle allows you, even the most atrocitized of you, even the most atrocious of you, you belong to that circle. Come as you are. I meet you where you are. And you are already held, you're already loved, you're already known, you're already seen. And if we can hold that space, if we can hold that space for the Rwandan refugees, for the Sudanese, for the, for every atrocity. Koreans were interned by the Japanese, the communist Chinese came through, the imperialist United States military came through, and over again. I sit with shamans who are in Russia, Siberia, and they said, this atrocity, that atrocity, one right after the other. And I work with indigenous communities, African, I sit with people. I am just guided, like to sit with people when they're going through divorce, when they're going through, everything we can imagine. I'm guided to sit with them. And I have had the honor and privilege of sitting with them. So 1, they're not alone. 2, they're not outside the circle. And 3, we're holding the empty chair for anybody who wants to come or who they don't even know they can come. So holding that empty seat. And then there are tools and techniques and methods that healers have been working on. There's so many now, breath being one, somatic release, EMDR, tapping, therapy. There's so many techniques. Yes, we need to overcome the victim state. Our language, our perception holds us in the patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to sound really, really rude. There's a part of white male privilege that is held by white women unconsciously that speaks of this, that holds themselves and then others into that. It's the most painful to watch someone do things to themselves and then do it to another person because they themselves have not done the work of recognizing that everyone we see is us. And when we get the tools, when we receive the breath, when we receive the tools, when we receive the power, when we receive the gifts, when we receive, then we think it's selfish, but we're really doing it for you.
It's all
Thank you
part of
very
the
much,
system.
Jiyun, and thank you very much, Jackie and Maria, for holding such a beautiful space. But we do have to finish this session too, unfortunately. I think this is a great topic for a circle as well, because if we don't heal, we cannot move on. And thank you very much for bringing such an important topic forward and speaking so openly to all of us. Maria, your last word.
Thank you, Violeta. I was remembering in Colombia, we have many indigenous communities, and I go a lot to visit them, and I found this image in one of them. I'm gonna read it. It says, apartheid was legal, colonialism was legal, slavery was legal, because legality is a question of power, not of justice. So it's a very powerful idea, and I think we need to transcend, like to concentrate on healing ourselves and go beyond to that co-responsibility we were writing about in the chat. Because if not, we keep on going back and forth from victim to victimary to savior, and we don't go beyond.
Thank you very much. And we're passing the torch on to the 10th hour, just on the hour. So I'm sorry to deprive you of 2 to 3 minutes for a break, but you can still take it. However, the next hour starts now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.